Today, we're going to talk about why so many women over 40 feel like they're behind, where that feeling actually comes from, and most importantly, how to stop letting it steal the years you still have ahead of you. Have you ever found yourself standing in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher, scrolling through social media, or driving home from work when a thought suddenly sneaks into your mind? I really thought I'd be further along by now. Maybe you thought you'd have more money. Maybe you thought your marriage would feel different. Maybe you thought you'd finally figured out what you wanted to do with your life. Maybe you thought you'd feel more confident, more settled, more fulfilled, and then you look around and think, what happened? If you're over 40 and you've been carrying that quiet disappointment around with you, today's conversation is for you. Because what if I told you that feeling behind isn't actually evidence that you failed? What if it is evidence that you've been measuring yourself against a timeline that never was designed for your real life in the first place? Today, we're going to talk about why so many women over 40 feel like they're behind, where that feeling actually comes from, and most importantly, how to stop letting it steal the years you still have ahead of you. Because here's the truth: you may not be behind at all. You may simply be looking at your life through the wrong lens. So let's talk about the thought that haunts so many women. One of the most common things I hear from women over 40 is this: I thought I'd have it all figured out by now. It's amazing how many different women say the exact same thing: different backgrounds, different careers, different incomes, different life experiences. Yet somehow they're all carrying the same secret fear that everyone else received the instruction manual for life and they didn't. A few years ago, I was having coffee with a woman in her late 40s. Successful career, beautiful home, and wonderful children. The kind of life many people would admire. And suddenly she just looked at me and said, I don't understand why I still feel like I'm behind. I remember thinking, behind who? Behind what? According to whom? Because from outside, she appeared to be doing incredibly well. That's when I realized something important. The feeling of being behind isn't usually about reality, it's about expectations. And expectations can be incredibly dangerous when we never stop to question them. Many of us grew up believing life worked like a checklist. You know, graduate, check mark. Get married, check mark. Build a house, check mark. Build a career, check mark. Raise children, check mark. Become successful, check mark. And live happily ever after, check mark. Simple, predictable. The problem is that real life rarely cooperates. Some women get married at 25 and they're divorced by 45. Some women become mothers at 22 and others become mothers at 42. Some women find their dream career at 24 and others discover it at 57. Yet somehow we keep judging ourselves according to a timeline that just doesn't exist. Imagine hiking through a forest. Would you stop every 10 minutes and complain that you're not where another hiker is? Of course not, because they started from a different spot. They may have different equipment. They have different obstacles, different destinations. Yet that's exactly what we do in life. We compare our chapter 12 to someone else's chapter 18, then wonder why we feel discouraged. Let me tell you about Karen. She's a friend of mine. At 48, Karen felt like a failure, not because she had failed, but because she had changed. She spent 20 years building a career she thought she wanted. Then one day she woke up and realized she was miserable. She felt trapped, exhausted, disconnected from herself, yet she kept thinking, I can't start over now. And then one afternoon, she was sitting in her car after work and asked herself a question: if I were starting from scratch today, would I choose this life? The answer was immediate: no. And that answer terrified her. But it also freed her because for the first time, she stopped asking, why am I not further along? Why am I not further ahead? And started asking, am I even headed in the right direction? You see, that question changed everything. Within 2 years, she had completely reinvented her life, not because she was behind, but because she finally stopped pretending she was somewhere she wasn't. This brings us to something incredibly important. Many women are chasing goals they don't actually want. They've simply inherited them. Somewhere along the way, we absorb messages about what success should look like. You should have this income. You should have this relationship. You should look this way. You should have accomplished more. The word should becomes a constant companion. And here's an exercise I want you to try. The next time you hear yourself say, I should, pause and then ask, do I actually want this? Not what society wants, not what your family wants, not what your friends want. What do you want? Sometimes that answer surprises people because often they've spent years climbing a ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. So let's talk about social media for a minute because comparison has become a full time job for many women. Every day, we're exposed to highlight reels, vacation photos, business successes, happy marriages, perfect kitchens, glowing skin, amazing transformation. What we're rarely shown are the struggles, the therapy sessions, the panic attacks, the sleepless nights, the financial stress, the loneliness, the uncertainty. You see someone's finished chapter. You don't see the years it took them to write it. And because of that, comparison becomes incredibly misleading. The woman you're envying may be looking at your life wishing she had what you have. That's the funny thing about comparison. Nobody wins. You don't know their story. Here's something I wish every woman understood. You have absolutely no idea what someone else's journey has looked like. You don't know what battles they fought. You don't know what support they've had. You don't know what sacrifices they've made. You don't know what pain they're carrying. Think about two women crossing a finish line. One had a smooth path, and the other spent years overcoming trauma, grief, financial hardship, illnesses, or caregiving responsibilities. Would it make sense to judge them by the same timeline? Of course not. Yet we do this to ourselves constantly. We compare our journey to someone else's without knowing anything about the terrain they've traveled. Something fascinating happens in our 40s, our 50s, and beyond. Many women begin questioning everything: the career, the marriage, the friendships, the goals, the identity they've carried for decades. And often this scares them. They think something is wrong. But what if nothing is wrong? What if you're evolving? Think about adolescence. It was messy, confusing, uncomfortable. You were becoming someone new. Midlife can feel remarkably similar, except this time you're not becoming who the world wants you to be. You're becoming who you really are. And that process can feel incredibly disorienting. Now, let's talk about the woman who has always been responsible, the helpers, the achievers, the woman everyone depends on. If that's you, listen carefully. Many high achieving women develop a belief early in life. The belief sounds something like this: if I accomplish more, I finally feel good enough. So they work harder, they achieve more, they take care of everyone, push through exhaustion, keep going. And then one day they realize something: the finish line keeps moving on them. No matter how much they accomplish, it's never enough. Because the problem was never achievement, the problem was self worth. You cannot achieve your way into feeling worthy. Worthiness isn't something you earn, it's something you recognize. I want to share something with you. The next time you think, I should be further along by now, replace it with this question: compared to what? Seriously, ask yourself, compared to what? Compared to whose timeline? Compared to whose expectations? Compared to whose life? Most of the time, you'll discover there isn't actually a valid question. It's just a feeling, and feelings aren't facts. Sometimes they're simply stories we've repeated so many times that they feel true. One of the healthiest things you can do is stop comparing yourself to other people. Instead, compare yourself to who you used to be. Think about where you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What have you survived? What have you learned? What wisdom have you gained? And what strengths have you developed? Most women are far more resilient than they give themselves credit for. They focus on what's missing instead of recognizing how much they've already overcome. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't pushing harder, it's letting go of our outdated expectations, letting go of our impossible standards, letting go of the version of yourself you thought you were supposed to become. Many women spent years mourning a life they never lived, the career they didn't pursue, the relationship they didn't have, the opportunities that they missed. But there comes a point when you just have to stop looking backwards, not because your regrets aren't real, but because your future deserves your attention. You cannot build a meaningful future while constantly arguing with yourself over your past. If you're watching this today and thinking, but I'm really not where I want to be, that's okay. You don't have to pretend everything is perfect. You don't have to love every part of your life. You don't have to settle, but you also don't have to shame yourself. You can accept where you are while still working towards where you want to go. Those two things can exist at the same time. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is simply starting from where you are, the reality of where you are. And reality is always the strongest foundation for change. So the next time that familiar thought appears, I should be further along by now, I want you to remember something. Maybe the goal isn't to be further along. Maybe the goal is to be more aligned with what is going on in your life. More honest, more authentic, more connected to what truly matters. Because at this stage of life, success isn't about proving yourself anymore. It's about becoming yourself. And here's the question I want to leave you with today. What if the woman you're becoming is actually right on time? Not late, not behind, not falling short, right on time. Think about that, and I'll see you in the next video.